I just got a notice that says Hangouts is going away in 2 days, so I wonder what they're going to allow me to replace this with for bringing people on.
It probably won't be as good. It seems like every time they replace something, it's a downgrade.
Well, yeah, they never. That's like when Windows Vista came out. I lost a whole bunch of ability with video play in there that I never got back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing happened to me. I've got I bought a Sony camera and a lot of software to make my own videos. Well, they made an upgrade, said we're going to discontinue this other, and you got to switch over to it to do the new Windows 10, all this and that. I lost so many functions. I mean, it's like a toy now compared to something that actually was, a professional piece of equipment there. I mean, they just turned it into a toy.
You can probably get those functions back if you buy like $1,000 worth of equipment.
It was. I've got the equipment and I've got the computer and this and that. It was just their software. They just made their software where it just didn't have all the functions it used to have. So used to, I could go in and pull video from other old videos. Now it's only set up to take video from my Sony camera. It's like, okay, it got to be all Sony equipment now. Can't pull from anything that you had from other equipment. I was not very happy with Sony. Very unhappy.
Yeah, Sony's trying to sit there, be their only game, and not share with other.
Yeah, do not play well with others.
Yeah, Apple used to be the same way. Apple may still be the same way, although it works with PC now most of the time. All right.
See, I've got an Apple computer, so I'll tell you what, though, when you go back and forth between PC and Apple, it'll just drive you nuts. Because like my Diamond system, I guess, okay, I won't place an order. Bear with me while I place this order. I won't tell you every time I hit a button. And they're like, they think you're joking with your button. I mean, literally, what's 2 buttons on a Mac is 20 on a PC. I mean, remember, I always heard stories about Clippy. You always wanted to have a conversation. Well, that's the Mac. You're about to do this. Okay, now you're doing this. You just did this. Now, about what you just did. I mean, we're just like, just do it. I know what I'm doing. Let me hit the button.
Exactly. Well, the computer has to babysit you to make sure you're not going to, I don't know, enter the nuclear launch codes or something.
I know. Yeah. Have you ever watched the last Sean Connery James Bond movie, Never Say Never Again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right in there, they've got a thing where the guy gets a fake retina, and you got a computer voice that comes on. Presidential authority confirmed. Nuclear or test dummy warheads will be replaced with live thermonuclear devices. Have a nice day. Well, I made that my answering machine message there.
Oh man, yeah.
So like also, what do you mean? I just loaded up live nuclear devices. I tell you what, it did away with the telemarketers really well.
I bet it did. That was one of the things I really got a kick out of in Watchmen, in the book, when they're breaking into Adrian Veidt's computer system, and Night Owl's typing in the password or trying to type in the password that he thinks is it, and the computer comes back and says incomplete password. Would you like to add more characters? I'm like, well, that's a very helpful system. So, yeah, you've got almost the right password. Keep trying.
Just a few more, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so how are things going in the store? What's selling? What we haven't talked about the stuff that's selling in a while.
Well, I mean, Marvel lost their minds. DC, it sounds like they're about to lose their mind. I don't know. Marvel is just like half the stuff you order has no sales history, and sometimes just an insane amount of variance, and variants that are impossible for retailers like myself to get. I can't sell 5,000 copies, 2,000 copies, or even 1,000 copies of a single issue. So there's just a lot of things I can't even qualify for. And so people always come in looking for those covers. Have you got this? I just want to pay cover price, because they've seen it listed in other places. And of course, then there's that hot book that will come out that they didn't tell us that, hey, this is going to have first appearance of a new character. So you sell out right away. Then also you got people coming out of the woodwork from all around the country. Oh, well, I just want to get this for my kid, or I just want to read the story, but I don't want to pay anything more than cover price. I have no customers who aren't up. Like my customers are not up on what's going on in the world, and I'll just have all my copies still sitting on the shelves. I mean, then it's kind of crazy. But DC, I've liked what they've been doing because weekly is a bad thing. They never make weekly comics because they just don't sell. You don't have enough time to promote them. Bi-weekly is as often as a book should be published. And bi-weekly does actually work well. I think it maybe works better on a seasonal thing like the summer. That's one thing both Marvel and DC have gotten away from is heavy pushes in the summer. Like somewhere, somebody got a hold of them and said, no, when people go back to school, when they're broke, that's when you want to publish all your titles. And that seems to be when they do all their big initiatives. And, we're used to, they did it in the summer. And I mean, my summer sales would be twice what it was the rest of the year. Well, nowadays, summer is just flatline. I mean, it's just, they don't do their initiatives. They put them in the time where people don't have any money, especially like September, worst month of the year, right next to February. And that's when they do all their big initiatives because, hey, they did that X-Men #1 a long time ago. They don't pay any attention to the fact that every retailer in America lost money on the book. They're like, hey, look at all the copies the retailers bought. That must be when we should do it. And they've just been sticking with the September launches ever since. And it's just, they just need to listen to somebody other than who they've been talking to.
So are you going to miss the Vertigo line? Do you have a lot of customers for that?
Oh, I tell you, Vertigo is just withering on the vine. They just weren't doing much with it. I mean, when you had things like Sandman, Why the Last Man, Preacher, it had good followings. It's all about the comics are a very simple format. It doesn't matter what line it is, what publisher it is. Good story, good art. It's that simple. And you just can't just this is different or this is odd or this has got some sort of social justice warrior plan behind it. People want a good story and good art, and that's all it comes down to. It doesn't matter all the other. I mean, you can have that other in there if it's part of the story, but you can't hammer round pegs into square holes. And sometimes they were trying to do that, I think. Yeah,
it's funny that you bring that up because that's the exact phrase that Cena Grace used last night.
Oh, really?
Marvel took some hits last night, and there's a lot of discussion going on because Cena Grace, Iceman got canceled again, and he had his new X-Men character that he created that he called Shade. And so last night he went on his Tumblr blog and pretty much spilled tea all over Marvel about, how they don't get behind a character, and he would try to promote his book, and he had, whether or not you like the book or not, if you're a writer and you're a freelance writer on a Marvel comic. You want to promote your book. You want to talk to the New York Times. You want to talk to the press.
Yeah.
And every time he did, Marvel would be like, because of the kind of book that Iceman was, they'd be like, yeah, no, you can't do that anymore until we approve your interviews and we approve your responses.
Yeah.
So, the last straw for him was, when he tried to promote Shade, being the kind of character that Shade was, and Marvel just, said, why don't we let the readers interpret what kind of character Shade is? So he kind of took it to the road, and that was it.
Boy, don't want promotion, don't want to promote something, don't want to do advertising. That's the craziest thing too, is like, I remember for years, I was always pushing Marvel and DC. It's like, why don't you guys, you're big, national companies, international, really, why don't you promote and advertise your own work? And the thing that always come back to was that, we're just a little bitty business. We don't have enough money to promote. That's up to the retailers to do our advertising for us. And
that's ridiculous.
But then they wanted to do digital. Suddenly they've got all this money to advertise with. And everybody thought, and especially Marvel and DC, was that once they started doing digital comics, that every comic book store in America would collapse like a chain of tire record stores when music went digital. And then they just, created out of the ether, and they wouldn't have to print comics anymore. What they failed to take into consideration is music is sound. The delivery system isn't that important. There's so many different ways to deliver it. Comic books are an actual physical experience. It's a tactile experience. You like to have that book in your hand because then you are the fast forward, the slow motion. You control how you look at it. People don't like to read them on computers. I mean, there is a percentage that will, but it's a better experience. Everybody says even the people who like to buy digital will come buy the actual comics because they don't like having to read them on the digital. They might do it if they have to, but then they'll come buy the book with the first chance they get. And so sales went up when all of a sudden they started advertising digital, or they thought we'd go out of business, and our sales went up. And they couldn't figure it out. I was like, well, you're advertising. I couldn't tell you how many people said, I didn't realize they made comics anymore. Because what had happened was back in the 90s, and of course I was having to fight this battle for a while, they quit putting the Comics Code Authority on there. But they were still being sold on newsstands that had that little spinner rack at the top that said, hey, kids comics. So people were always buying it for kids, found out, hey, guess what? That's not for kids. People complained, so they got pulled from all the 7-Elevens, grocery stores. Everybody removed comics from sale, and they couldn't find them anymore. Walmart wouldn't sell them in the South because of what happened with the Spawn comic. And one of the Walmart heiresses is buying a comic that was a little bit too mature for her grandchild, and so they were completely pulled from the South. So nobody could see comics anymore. So once they started advertising, like, oh, wait, they made comics? Well, I'm going to go find a place to get the real thing. And my sales went up. Retailers all around the country went up. And, advertising is kind of an important thing. Promotion is kind of an important thing. It's kind of like if you got a new book called Wild Stars going out for sale. You want to get on a podcast and tell somebody about it.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up. We got Arch City Comics here in the chat. Arch City and I have chatted before about comic books. He says, I read the title as Star Wars twice before I could comprehend what it actually said. I need more coffee. Yeah, Arch City's getting ready for their Saturday morning woke-up call for his podcast. And yeah, you're not woke enough yet, Adam. You got to get some coffee in you and then let people know that we're doing this podcast this morning, if you would, please, to get this Indiegogo going for Michael Tierney and the Wild Stars. And I've got it pulled up here, and you have got $1,500 raised already of your $8,000 goal. That's 18%. That's phenomenal for one day, first day.
Is it really? Okay. Of course, you want to hit it the first day, but, you always, it's kind of like being a retailer. Everybody say, hey, well, how's sales? Well, you're never going to say, oh, it's too much, man. We got too much sales coming in. You're never going to say that. It's like, well, it could be better, but, you're always happy for what you got. So appreciate the support we've gotten so far. Just got to get the word out there. I think it's only like something like a dozen backers or 17 backers or something like that. So people are popping for the big items right now. So we'll, we've got a lot of little items on there, a whole lot of different stuff, and just try to get the word out. So. You
got what kind of levels have you got on this thing now? Let's talk about what Wild Stars, the Indiegogo Wild Stars Rising is going to be about.
Okay, well, and I think one of the things that kind of gets lost because there's so much stuff on there is that there's two things going on really here. It's the 35th anniversary of my first publication of a Wild Stars public book. I mean, now I'd been writing the Wild Stars back in the 70s, wrote like about 7 novels that I was circulating around the New York, 5th Street, where all the publisher row was, and just going through all the editor desks, getting a lot of nice, encouraging letters back. But the same thing they say they want something new and different. As soon as you give them something new and different, they said, well, no, what we really mean is we want something that's like something else with just a little bit of a twist. And so it was just too different for them back then. So I started publishing my own comic in 1984, and that's the 35th anniversary that we're celebrating this year. And as you know, I'd been kind of busy doing a lot of other writing projects recently. I had that Dave Rush Burrell's 100-year art chronology. I'd been selling a lot of short stories to Kosova magazine, and then last year I wrote a Wild Stars 3. And because what it was, I started on it. I was like, okay, well, I need to have 35th anniversary next year. I got to have another new book by then. Well, I knocked it out so fast. I was like, well, I just had it published last year. Kosova wanted to publish it. And they did real well on a Kickstarter. Well, then when I told him, hey, I'd already got another one. I've got the Wild Stars 4 out. And so he committed to publish it without even reading it. And then as soon as he got it, he sent me an email in the middle of the night, goes, man, I'm really liking this story. Then he comes in to my store the next day, and he's got a smile. His head's bobbing. Goes. And he said, well, what was so great about it was not only was it a great story, that it made all the earlier books even better. Which apparently is, as an editor, he doesn't see that. Where works as a expand, keep improving and getting better. Because I've had a long-term plan. Like I said, I haven't even gotten to. I think I've only adapted one of the books of the 7 books I wrote back in the 70s. So I've got this huge past history, huge future history, huge current history. And so I'm tapping into all that. And so I can have a real complicated narrative going on, but it's all cohesive. And the Wild Stars 4 is the book he's publishing now. And it's if you go to his Indiegogo that's going on, he'll talk about how Wild Stars is on the scale of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, but that it's really incomparable. Well, as a writer, you love to hear the publisher be that enthusiastic about your work. So mostly what this is to launch Wild Stars 4. Now, in the Wild Stars, the concept of the Wild Stars is 75,000 years ago, mankind made their first migration into space and colonized planets circling the brightest stars in the night sky. Those are the Wild Stars. So every story you've ever heard about UFOs, space gods, and things like that, that's just been our cousins dropping by for a visit. And, and a lot of things happen out there. War spread to Earth. But one thing that I've never, ever explored in all the previous 35 years of the Wild Stars is why did that exodus happen? What caused the exodus? What was going on? Wild Stars 4 answers that.
So now Wild Stars 3, that was the Wild Stars Time Warmageddon.
Right.
So you have time travel going on in this, right, as well as deep sea exploration and space opera. You're covering all the bases of the classic science fiction tropes within this. Oh yeah, I've got monsters in there. I got all sorts of things. I've got really bad guys, alternate reality, Nazis. I mean, there's some pretty bad characters too. So I've got everything from cyborgs to androids. I mean, it just
We even have our own version of zombies through a bioenergetic formula. So I get all into the scientific basis behind that. So I've got a lot of stuff in there. I mean, when you've been working on something for so long, you can just layer and layer and layer. It's like I told on the very first Wild Stars, which, once the publisher of Kosovo, once he read it before, and he's like, man, not only do I want to publish this one, I want to publish the previous ones all in a matching set. Because to him, it was like one big story. And he is going to do all 4 books in one big 720-page hardcover omnibus with a nice wraparound dust wrapper done by Anton Oxnick, who did the Young Tarzan cover that Young Tarzan story I finished off with Edgar Rice Burroughs earlier this year. But to get back to what I was going to say is on the Wild Stars book 1, I called it the Book of Circles, because you can read through the whole thing. Once you get to the end, you can go right back to the first page, and it picks up right from where that last page left off. And so you can keep circling through. And I had one customer read it 5 times, and I can still show him stuff he missed that was just so layered on the detail. On my website, I've got one page. It's called The Hidden Wild Stars, for a lot of these little things that nobody would ever catch. And Wild Stars 2 took it from current time, because the Book of Circles happened primarily in the late 90s. Or mid 90s to late 90s. And Wild Stars 2 takes it from the new millennium into the future a couple hundred years, introduces a whole bunch of more new characters and expands the story from there. Wild Stars 3 kind of picks up where that left off. And then Wild Stars 4 picks up where that left off, but then at the same time goes way back in time and gives you what was going on 75,000 years ago.
Now, the Book of Circles, that was a graphic novel.
Correct.
Is that going to be the way it is in the omnibus? Is it going to start off graphic novel and then move into novel form? Are you ever going to go back into graphic novel?
Well, I tell you, it's really expensive to do comics right now. And the comic book industry, with a monopolized distribution system, and I'm not blaming Diamond. I mean, it's not like Diamonds are bad guys because they got a monopoly. The monopoly is what Marvel and DC want. And why do they want it? Because they don't want independent publishers having much access to the marketplace. And Diamond, naturally has the attitude of we get 90% of our money from 10% of our work with Marvel and DC and the premieres. The other 90% of work, we're going to get 10% of the money from the independents. Well, it's hard. I mean, you can have a profitable book, and Diamond's like, yeah, it makes money, but not enough to be worth our time. And so I've talked to so many other publishers that Diamond, doesn't even want to carry you. They'll want to drop you right in the middle of the storyline, not even let you finish a book. So as an independent publisher, you're dropping all this money on art. And then wait a minute, I might get halfway into the series and you not let me complete delivery. And so that's kind of what happened to me on the Wild Stars 3 that I was publishing in 2001, 2002. If you noticed that the first 6 issues were all normal size, and all of a sudden 7 was this monster triple-sized issue. Well, they said, okay, we're only going to give you 1 more. We don't want to distribute to you anymore. And I'm like, well, let me finish the story, but we'll give you 1 book. So I had to create this gigantic book because I originally had planned that for a 12-issue series. So I had to cram 6 issues basically into 3 and make it into one just giant oversized book. So that's why the issue number 7 of my Wild Stars is so large. So, I've had the rug pulled under me by Diamond myself. And so, when you don't have the kind of distribution like that, and like I said, I've talked to a lot of other publishers, they had profitable books, but they weren't profitable enough for Diamond. There's no sense in investing into it. Now, when I first started back in the 80s, or let's even go back to the 70s, when I was writing these stories, I was getting all sorts of good compliments on the stories, but publishers weren't wanting to buy it. Well, in the 80s, it became all you had 7 distributors. It was really easy to get comics published back then. And because you had 7 distributors, nobody wanted to be the guy who didn't have the latest hot thing. You had the black and white boom of the mid 80s. So black and white comics were very acceptable. Everybody wanted them. I sold those comics better than I did in 2001. 2001 to 2002. And it was one of those things where, I'm creating a better product, but I had less sales because I only had 1 distributor at that time. So Diamond would just order just barely enough to get by. Anybody wanted reorders, had damages, shortages, sorry, you're out of luck. Well, the publisher might still have copies, but it's not worth our time to get them to you. And it's not worth it now. Things have changed. Like I say, back in the 80s, it was easy to publish a comic, but still the book was, you had to go through 5th Street on New York. That's changed. Now it's easy to get a book published, and the comic is, like I say, it's very expensive. All of the art you got to pay for, the production. Whereas books, print on demand is a lot easier. I understand comics are starting to have more print on demand now too, but it's a lot more expensive to make a comic now than it is to make a book. So it's kind of flip flop. And so Wildstar's always started out as a book, and so I'm just kind of going back that way. Now I have worked it into the story about why Books of Circles is a graphic novel, and when you get to volume 2 of the Force Majeure, now that also started as a comic too. Yeah. And I had Armando Gil drawn it for me. Well, he was going to do a trilogy. Halfway through the second book of the trilogy, Armando just kind of disappeared on me. And you can't hire another artist to start picking up right in the middle of the second issue of a trilogy. You just can't do that. So what it is, I worked into the story like, oh, this is on purpose. And, and on the reviews, I got great reviews. Everybody saying, wow, that was really a great trick, a great technique that you did on that. And I was just taking a problem and making it look like I did it on purpose, but it really worked out well. So it's in the story about why book 1 is the way it is right now in graphic novel, and the answer is going to be in the glossary. That's going to be an addendum to Wildstar's book 4, because I went ahead and wrote a 29,000 word glossary explaining all the characters, peoples, and places of the Wildstars.
Well, that will definitely cover it all.
Right, and in there, I Book of Circles, and what it is the basis behind it. And this was something I was conscious of when I was doing. I was actually doing this on purpose in the back of my head. Was if you go back and read it, there's a telepath in there by the name of Daystar. Well, every person she encountered, it was like she was kind of picking her brain, and then at the end, she had kind of like a telepathic link with this one character called the Ancient Warrior, an immortal character. And so basically, everything she kind of pulled from other people's brains, that was the packet that he got. That was the Book of Circles. Whereas in Wildstars 2, all the images that you saw, those were part of a court-martial trial for this one bad commander. They had this Cincino character. And so, there's reasons for why, okay, that's why that was graphics, this was graphics, and this is text. So that's actually is part of the story, be that way. I don't know if anybody's ever really started a big story arc with graphics and then converted over to story before or not.
I don't know if anybody started that way. I know some books that have gone back and forth with it. There'll be like text for several chapters, and then there's a chapter that's a graphic novel, and then there'll be text again for another couple of chapters.
Right.
I can't recall any of their titles. I know they were like scholastic books. Right. I think like The Invention of Hugo Cabret that they turned into a movie was kind of like that, but it wasn't truly a graphic novel. It was the series of images in sequence, but it was no text on it. There were no word balloons. It was just you left the story and you watched him go through these motions here and these paces. Right. Then you come back to the story.
Now we've continued to try to keep, because people are expecting to have a lot of illustrations with Wildstars. So like on Wildstars 3, hired a couple different artists. Tim Lim did the cover. Then Mark Wheatley came in, and he was doing a lot of really nice interior illustrations that he also did. He works in color. So, I went ahead and bought the color and the black and white versions of both of them. And so those were 2 variant covers. You had one trade paperback that was a wraparound variant. We called that Spider Sailing. If you see the cover, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And the other one was where basically I have an interdimensional elder god attack on a spaceship. And that was a nice wraparound. We did that on a limited edition hardcover, Virgin. Now that's something else we're doing different this time too. It's like that hardcover, no text, nothing on the outside, just a complete Virgin cover. Now I've done some research, and as you know, Virgin covers are very common in comic industry, right?
Yes.
But you don't see it in the magazine or the book industry. Now, I realize the reason they used to do that, like you're out there on the rack, you got to have that text to try to get people drawn to you as part of the sale. However, not that many books are being sold in the bookstores now as compared to what's being sold on the internet. When you're sold on the internet, all that text, all that stuff's there anyway. So we're running Virgin covers on all 4 of the 35th anniversary edition books.
Well, that's very cool. Now, you mentioned how expensive it was to get a comic book. Mm-hmm. And to get a comic book made. And here we are talking about Indiegogo, which is, of course, experiencing a boom in these last couple of years here with people who have always wanted to make a comic book, couldn't afford it because it was expensive to hire an artist. Right. And now they're going out and they're crowdfunding, and they're getting the books sold in advance and then making it. If they didn't make enough money, then they don't hire the artist, and the book doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. That's something that you didn't have access to in the 80s when you were working on it. Right. Is that something that could lead you to do more graphic novel work? Because we're seeing, in the 80s when people were making their own comic books and they couldn't afford artists. They're doing stuff. You saw Eastman and Laird, and God bless Eastman and Laird. They were great, but the art was not what the house companies were doing.
It was different.
What we're seeing out of these Indiegogos here is we're seeing quality artwork, and sometimes beyond quality artwork because it's just so good, because the customers are seeing what they're going to buy first, and then they fund it. Say, yeah, I like what you do. I'm going to throw more money at you. You do more of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'd love to do more comics. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a weekly comic book strip right now. Fred Burroughs Inc. I'm doing a Beyond the Farthest Star. Now, it's an online subscription, $20, and you get all the strips, for an entire year, plus all the other strips that Burroughs Inc. publishes, plus all their entire backlog inventory. So you get thousands of strips. You can read the whole thing. If you click a link on my website where I'm promoting it, I have teasers for each week. I think we're up to week 17 now. And so that teaser will take you to their website where you can read 4 strips of any. You don't even have to be mine. Any of the strips they have. You can read 4 episodes for free before you have to decide if you want to subscribe. And you can see all the teasers, kind of what I'm doing. Now, when I say teasers on my website, I'm really teasing this because sometimes I'm talking about stuff that's really not happening in the story. I'm just like, hey, I'm not teasing you here, and I am. Because there's a joke, a running joke I have about one character called Claws to Clamp. Have a monster in the background, and so the teaser, I kind of gave him a little side story. That does not happen in the book. He was just a one-off, a background character. He just showed him one time, was never part of the story. But I've kind of got it worked in there. So, I have a little fun with that. So you get an alternative reality on my website there. But, so that's fun working on that. John Lucas is doing the pencils and inks. I'm doing the scripts, colors, and lettering. So, I'm still active making comics. I'd love to make more comic strips. Matter of fact, the Young Tarzan story that I wrote, I know Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc. is trying to negotiate with Dark Horse to have them doing a comic book adaptation of that short story too.
Now that would be Young Tarzan and the Mysterious She, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, published also by Crosova this spring. It was funny when Crosova did my Wild Stars 3 last year, and they did that as a standalone book. It was their first ever Crosova Presents, and that was their best-selling book he'd ever had. Well, then when he did the Young Tarzan, that was the best-selling book he ever had. So I said, hey, I got a Wild Stars 4. He's like, yeah, I want to publish it. I hadn't even looked at it yet. He already committed to put it on the schedule there. So
that's awesome. So the strips now, how are they presented when we look at them online, when we log in? Is it like, here's the full screen, or do you go through like a Comixology?
It's full screen. Yeah. No, it's a full screen. It's basically like a Sunday strip where you get like a large 4-panel section.
That's the way I would like to read them. That when you talk about comics going digital, and how we like to hold the book in our hand and control the speed.
Actually, I can kind of give you a quick little flip through on it. Can you see this okay?
Yeah, I can. Can you raise it up a little bit?
How's that? That's like the first week. Like the second, third. Now, one thing about when you print these out, these were printed on a very, not a high dollar computer. They, you lose like 20% of your contrast and your brightness when you print like this. So, there's a lot lost. And, it looks so much better when you see it online. And there's just so much more that you can see, more detail like that, more background, so much stuff that's in there that's not in there otherwise. But yeah, I've got this written all the way through about this time next year. And John's, a couple months ahead on the art. And so we've got quite a ways. As a matter of fact, now I'm starting to show you previews of episodes that haven't been shown yet. So I better stop there. But a new one just went up today there. Yeah, so episode 17 just went live today.
Now I could read comics online like that because it's, the 4 panels and you follow it through. I tried the Comixology thing, and I was not a fan of how they present it. Because like you said, when you're holding the comic book, you control how fast you do it. You control everything about it, the tactile experience. Scott McCloud talks about how most of the action in a comic book happens in the gutter between one panel to the next, because that's your brain making the jump from one here to the other here.
Right.
And with the digital, you have the panel that you're reading. Mm-hmm. And then the next panel appears, and you don't have that gutter spacing. You don't have that play where you can arrange the page you want. I mean, I know you can see the whole page and you can still read it that way, but once you're doing that, then you can't even see the text on the page. You got to tap those panels and have them blow up at you.
Yeah, digital, it's actually dropping in sales. Digital, when it was a brand new technology, of course, saw increases every year. And the publishers were all giddy about that. Like, hey, we won't have to print these things anymore. Look at all the expense, all the time and trouble we can save. We can just, print comics out of the ether. And then now they've peaked and now they're dropping down. And I'll tell you what,
you're going to get challenged on that.
Okay, I'm sorry?
You're going to get challenged on that, because one of the things that I keep seeing people talk about when people discuss the declining market of comics in stores. Now, I know that your store is increasing in sales because you're smart about what your people want and you pay attention to it.
That's what it all comes down to, yeah.
Yeah, but whenever people talk about, well, this book is declining in sales and, they're just sitting on the racks, they're not selling, nobody's buying these things. The comeback is always, yes, but the digital sales are very, very high, and you can't prove that they're not because nobody publishes numbers on what the digital sales are.
ICV2.com. That's where I get my information from. And they're the ones who've reported that they peaked and that they've been declining. So, of course, now everything is kind of like having to be deductive work because, like you said, everybody's real closed about what they report. But they have reported that they have peaked and they've been dropping now for a couple of years. So I've read that actually probably from a couple of sources. Again, I'm not the source because I don't deal with digital. They really took advantage of retailers when that whole thing started because they said, hey, put this portal window on your website and we'll give you a percentage of all the sales that comes through that portal. And all these people say they were subscribing to digital comics that way. I think I got maybe $1.10 from Comixology, and that's all I was ever paid. Oh, nobody's going through there, and all my customers tell me a different story. DC, same thing, never paid me a dime. Marvel, on the other hand, though, when it was first starting, because people filled out surveys about how they got there, they were paying me several $100s a month for the first few months, and then that went away too. So now they got their foot in the door, and then like, okay, well, thank you retailers for giving us your customers. Bye, see you. We don't need you anymore, and
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting approach to selling digital. Well, not only are we going to sell digital, but why don't you give us your customer base? That's a way of doing it.
Pay you. Oh, did we say we're going to pay? Oh, yeah, you didn't have any sales. And how can you prove it? Exactly. That's the thing with the digital. How can you prove that they're selling your digital stuff? It's so rampant for a way to cheat. Not only retailers, publishers too. How do you know you're getting paid for all the digital sales they're getting?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have an honest distribution system, like I did distribute stuff through Amazon, so I get the reports there. But even then, it's a little bit dicey about how to dig through. It's like, okay, we've got 3 titles. How do we know which one sold? How do we know which one didn't sell?
Yeah, well, it's like me as a writer and being on Amazon. Like I can tell you have published a book that had a short story in there called Gods and Services. And I can tell whenever you sold the copy because it'll show up on my author report. So
there you go.
So I know, okay, you sold like 10 there, sold 5 here. So I can say exactly when they were sold and everything like that. So it's nice you have a complete history of all that. It's a lot of information and tracking on Amazon. You can keep track of that. The digital, however, that's another story.
Yeah, because it's even on Amazon's digital, you got to wait like a month after the sales because you can see how many pages are being read. You get that little Kindle. Here are all people who are reading your book for free because they've got the Kindle app. And then next month we're going to say, okay, we're going to kind of convert this through a magical formula, and you made 27 cents because people read 30 pages of your book. So I don't know, it's interesting.
But you got to get to a certain dollar amount in a quarter. Otherwise, next quarter it rolls over. You didn't reach that level. That money just disappeared. You don't get it at all.
Exactly.
That's another way Amazon works too. I mean, everything's slanted for the distributor to make all the money, and you as a publisher, or even as the writer or retailers, it's to your disadvantage.
Well, let's talk about the distribution of the Indiegogo here, because you have multiple different levels on this Indiegogo for Wild Stars Rising. So let's talk about some of the different. All
right, now it's not actually different levels.
Indiegogo
is a whole different bird from Kickstarter. Kickstarter was levels, this and that, and somebody wanted to add on. Well, they put extra money on there, but it didn't say what that money was for. Indiegogo is better and worse in some ways. It's like you can't do shopping cart with Indiegogo. You can't say, I want this, I want that, I want the volume 1, 2, 3, 4, or I just want 2 and 3 or whatever, because you have to buy each one individually. So you want with this one book, you got to make a purchase. Then you want to go back and get this other book. So everything that you want to grab off the shopping cart, you got to do it and make a purchase one at a time. Now, the nice thing about that is when it comes time for fulfillment, there's no question about what you're buying. You know exactly. And, that's going to be real good and real quick to, because the bad thing with Kickstarter, you had to send out all these, surveys. What was it you were wanting? It's like my Wild Stars 3. I think we've still got 3 orders boxed up and shipping, still waiting for people to tell us their address. That was a year ago. Shipped that out a year ago. We're still waiting for 3 people to say, here's the address to send these three packages to. They're going to sit there forever if they have to. But with Indiegogo, you get all that information right away. And what's being offered on this Indiegogo is the Wild Stars 1, 2, 3, and the brand new number 4 in new editions. Now, there's also a lot of bonuses like the 3, which is being reissued that sold out last year, the Warmageddon. That has a couple of short stories that I had published in Crossover before, which had a connection to the Wild Stars. One was called Shark Fighter. Another one was called The Bears of 1812, which we've retitled to Grass Maiden. That's a lost history story about basically colonial era goings on with Sacagawea and the War of 1812. And it's a fun story, it really is. And then another short story deals with the Wild Stars called The Grim Grip. This will be the first publication, and that's going to be in the new edition of the 3. And then, of course, Wild Stars 4 has got the brand new Wild Stars 4 story, plus the 29,000-word glossary. This is one of those things that I mentioned at the start of the glossary. If you get to, if you're lost, you want to try to remember who this character was, maybe you're reading book 4, like, I don't remember who this guy was. When you get to the point where you don't realize the information you're being told, stop, because you're into the spoiler territory, because I give you complete biographies and everything like that. And so that's going to be what's in the 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, he's also offering some, we have a few extra copies that were made extra for just this purpose of last year's Time Warmageddon. So we have some copies for sale of the Tim Lim cover, of the trade paperback Mark Wheatley cover, and the hardcover Mark Wheatley cover wraparound that I was telling you about that was done in Virgin format. Then there's also sets of Wild Stars comics. There's 2 art prints with Mark Wheatley art on it. One has never been published in color before. It was just a black and white interior, so this is its first color presentation. Got some of my old Multiversal Scribe magazine from 1977. We've got a number of different little bonuses and options on there. They're going to be giving away free stickers. I've got some free promo posters from when the comics were running back in 2002 that we're going to be giving away. So we got all sorts of little things on there. That's one thing I got sidetracked earlier. I didn't finish telling you about some of the unique things we're doing with this Wild Stars 1 through 4 set, about how we're doing virgin covers. And I was saying about how the books, they don't do that a whole lot. And of course, you try to write virgin in books or magazine. Well, you're going to get a whole lot of books that have a lot of text on it, but they're not talking about art. But another thing we're doing different is the back covers. All 4 back covers, if you put them all together, will make one giant overall image, which I don't know if anybody's ever done a design on the back cover before. So that's where we put all the text, and we want to give you something extra special. So when you assemble all 4 books together, you get this big design on the back covers of all 4 when they're assembled.
Now, that's very cool. Now, all these different perks here, you start with the Ehrlich add-on. Now, Ehrlich is, of course, one of the main Immortal Warrior kind of characters that go on in here. That's a $10 perk. That's unheard of because almost every Indiegogo you ever see, it starts off $25-$30 for the basic. And you've got, your first marker add-on. I think that's book 1. And there's your Multiversal Scribe. I'm going right through it right here.
Right, yeah.
The Indiegogo page.
Yeah, the first 2 you mentioned, that was the first one, the Ehrlich, that's the 1984. That's the very first comic ever made. Printed like about 2,500 of them. And, of course, being a retailer for 38 years, every now and then you'll find this box that got lost and like, wow, hey, look, I've got 2 more copies of this I can sell now. And that's kind of like a discovery. The same thing with the other one, first marker. Now, what's unique about that comic is, again, this is just me doing it all myself. That one, not only did I write, pencil, ink, letter, I did the whole thing creatively. I also printed that in my garage. And on top of that, that's the first comic that ever had full stamping on the cover, first comic that ever had die cutting on the cover. To this date, it's still the only comic that ever had die cutting on the back cover. When I say die cutting, it means where you kind of cut a hole out of the center so you can see what lies beneath it, because I had the art positioned beneath it to kind of give you like a preview into the book. And then on top of that, I did a printer's trick where there's this one page where I have a old wood mill in the foreground, and I have a mountain in the background. And I would fade the mountain out throughout the print run. So if you got just a solid mountain in the background, that's early in the print run. If it's looking really faded, that's late in the print run. But that way, each individual comic is a little bit different from all the other. It's like each individual comic's like a print run. Now, originally, I was going to make 4,000, but because I did so many little tricks with it, it ended up only having about 2,000 copies made of that one. So yeah, that's one of the other $10 books being offered because I found another box of Discovery. And the same thing with the Multiversal Scribe, like, oh, hey, I have some more of these after all.
Well, those are definitely going to be collector's items, because if you get, to the modern stuff and you really, really like it, it's almost impossible when you find out that, hey, this started something back here that I want to have a copy of.
Right.
You just can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, and the Multiversal Scribe, that's from 1977, and that does have a Wild Star story in it too. Because I always I like to write different genres. It's like there was a review that just came up this month about the Young Tarzan, where the reviewer was talking about how I'm a hard writer to pigeonhole because I use a different voice for everything I write. And that's the same thing I did with the Multiversal Scribe. I wrote 5 different genres in 5 different styles. And one of them was a Wild Star story. As a matter of fact, it makes reference to a character who's a major character in Wild Stars 3 and 4. Well, Wild Stars 3 and 4 make reference to something he did to create that location, I should say.
Well, we've got the link to the Indiegogo here on the video, and we definitely want people to click that, check that out. We'll continue promoting it throughout the month.
Well, appreciate that.
What kind of I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but once the thing's over, what's the timeline for your fulfillment? I mean,
no later than October. I mean, everything's written, everything's been edited, everything's laid out. The only thing we are waiting on is Mark Wheatley is still working on the covers for 3 and 4. Matter of fact, we'll probably have the cover for probably number 3 sometime next week, and probably the 4 the week after that, no later than that. Then we also have Anton Oxnard working on the cover for the wraparound hardcover also.
Okay, now
so that's the only thing we're waiting on the 3 covers.
Let's talk about the artist here as we begin to wrap up this, because I know who Mark Wheatley is, but I've been in comics for years and years. So can you let the new people know, this younger crowd who's into the Indiegogo thing, who these guys are, where they come from, what their backgrounds are?
Well, Mark Wheatley just wrapped up a Kickstarter called Songs of the Giant, where he went through, and it was a big old hardcover book where he did color illustrations and black and white illustrations of Edgar Rice Burroughs, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft poems. And he has really great color use. Mark Wheatley, probably his first recognized work was a series called Mars, back like in the late 80s, part of the independent publication push. And he has really developed his art style, and his painted work is just phenomenal. He has such good use of color. So Mark is about a 30-year industry veteran, and he's doing a lot of work. I'm trying to think of some of the other works he's done. He's done a bunch of it, though. He illustrated one of the Burroughs' recent Wild Adventure covers for one of their hardcovers, where they have new writers come on and do new work. And I am working on a novel for them also. Probably shouldn't say too much about it yet, but that's probably see publication sometime next year. So I'm working on that. Yeah, he's a very well-established industry veteran.
Okay, and this other guy that's working on the wraparound, I didn't catch his name because it kind of
Anton Oxnard. He's from another country. That is the publisher of Kursova's guy, and so everything I get through is through Kursova on connections with him there, and he worked real well with us on the Young Tarzan cover, because when he first sent the layout and the look of it, I was like, that's just too dark. Come on, the jungle is a colorful place. So he sends it back again, and I was like, it looks a lot better, but this blonde hair, the blonde should be just. You should be able to see the blonde better. So he goes in there and puts like this glow on it. And I'll tell you what, by that, on the 3rd try, that cover popped. And one of the things you'll see in all the reviews of Young Tarzan is like, that's one of my favorite covers ever. And
yeah, I have seen that cover. So I know the work you're talking about. He did a beautiful job on that thing.
Oh yeah, and it's great, because artists sometimes when they do something, you're like, hey, here's one thing I think you can improve on it. Sometimes they kind of get their back up, like, what do you mean? It's not good enough. And but he listened, and I'll tell you what, it was better painting as a result of it there. So, and I think, like I said, that once that last, it was kind of like a last twist of Ruby Cubes. Everything just fell into place, and it's just a fantastic cover.
Awesome. Well, there's our timer. Michael, thank you for stopping by with us again. We haven't done this in a while, and we need to we need to keep these up every like once a month or once every 2 months at the bare minimum, just to talk about the industry and see what's going on, and of course to check up and see what's going on with Tarzan and the Wild Stars. So we will.
They can find everything they want about all that if they go to my website, www.thewildstars, THEWILDSTARS.com. And everything that we've been talking about, it's all there.
Fantastic. Everybody hit that link for the Indiegogo. Get down there and push this through. This is only an $8,000 project. I know that everybody who's into the comics and follows me on Twitter at Andrew's Disciple and, of course, at Critical Blast, I've seen projects much larger than this get pushed through much faster. So I know you people can get in there and contribute. This is a quality product. You're going to be very happy with what you get. Michael, we will talk with you again soon, find out how this wraps up.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And I thank you for getting the word out there. I really appreciate that.
All right. We'll see you later, my friend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.